Here's my Moth story. I like to call it, Nobody Would Mistake Me for Mr. T. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm white. I'm like really white. I'm like, photographers come to me to set the white balance on their cameras white. I tell people that I like jazz, but really it's kind of white. I used to do improv comedy white. That's how white I am. And it's more than that. I started doing improv comedy because I bought a gift certificate for improv classes from the public television auction. This is like white squared, right? But then I ended up doing improv for many years. And I learned very well in improv the two most important rules, like rule number 1 and rule number 2 in improv. Rule number 1 in improv is you never say no. It's always yes and. You know, whatever your partner in a scene hands you, you have to say yes and build on it. That's like the most important. You can't say no. And the second most important rule is commit to the bit. Now, you know that that's an important rule because it rhymes. But basically the idea is that nobody is going to laugh at like a 50% French accent, right? It's, oui, monsieur. You know, that's not funny. You have to be, oui, monsieur, would you like my baguette? You have to do 150%. You have to commit to the bit. And I bring those ideas to my job, which is teaching high school English in Milwaukee. And not only does the improv factor into that, but also race. Because of who I am and what I do for a living, I am really keenly aware of race. There have been many times in my professional life when I'm the only white person in a room. You know, it's not just that I start to feel self-conscious about it, but I have to start thinking about what are my unconscious biases? What are my privileges? What does being white allow me to do that my students can't do? And it's, you know, I like to think that after the Obama administration, we'd solved racism, but we have not. So, you know, race is still always sort of keenly on my mind. And these two things came together a few years ago. My wife and I we spent a long weekend in Chicago, and as part of that, we went to a show at the Second City Comedy Theater. If you don't know the Second City theater troupe, they're this famous sketch comedy group. They do a little improv, but mostly it's sketch comedy in Chicago. Everybody from Jim Belushi to Tina Fey have come up through Second City. Lots of other famous people who I can't remember right now. But, you know, like we were going to have a good time at a comedy show. And I'd been doing improv for a few years at that point. So I knew some improv. I also only knew enough improv to be really dangerous. I was not that good at it. And my wife knew this. So she said to me when we got to the comedy show, they sat us in the front row, which was dangerous, although we were kind of off to the side. But she said, no volunteering, no shouting out answers or suggestions, no raising your hand for any, you are not going to participate in this show as anything other than an audience member. And I was like, you're right. Yes, dear. So the show starts and it's funny, and there are a bunch of different sketches that kind of have some related themes, but mostly don't. But at one point, there's a guy who comes out, one of the actors, he comes out with this bundle of papers and he says, I have written a play. It is the most amazing play anybody has ever written. I would like to perform it to you now. And he's looking at a script and he starts reading, and he's reading two parts. He's reading a man's part and a woman's part, and he's doing that thing where like, well, yeah, blah, 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 oh, blah, blah, blah. You know, and eventually he's like, this isn't going to work. Can I get a volunteer to play the woman in this? And, you know, a bunch of women raise their hand. He picks one, pulls her up on stage, hands her a copy of the script. They start doing it again. And pretty soon a third character enters in this play. And he says, oh, you know, it's still not going to work. Can I get somebody else to play this other character? And somebody raises their hand and pulls them up on stage, hands them a script. And then, you know, they start over from the beginning again of the play, page 1. And this is where it happened. He walked directly to me and he reached out his hand and he said, "I need you," pulling me up on stage. And I'm looking back at my wife like, I swear to Jeebus, I did not plan But anyway, pulls me up on stage. He hands me a script, and I look down at the part that has been highlighted. And the part that has been highlighted was not just any random character. It was Mr. T, right? The first few words are, "I pity the fool." There's no question that I am supposed to play Mr. T. And so in this moment on stage, looking at the script, I have this choice to make. Because on the one hand, I can't say no, and I have to commit to the bit. But on the other hand, I would be doing the voice of a recognizable black man. I would be doing his it's almost like performing in blackface for me to be Mr. T. And so I'm thinking about this, I'm looking at the script, and my cue is coming up. I get the other actors, are, audience members, and they're not professional, they're doing their thing, and I'm standing there, and it gets to my line, and I say, you know what? In this case, I think the rules of improv have to override white privilege. So, I get, "I pity the fool who don't trust Mr. T. I'm going to throw my gold." I'm doing the full Mr. T. I'm 150% Mr. T. Everybody laughs because it's a comedy show, and the line, it's not just me. The script was funny, and the whole situation was funny. And we get, a couple minutes later, the actor who says it's his best play ever, he grabs all the scripts. He says, "This isn't working. Thank you guys for helping. Thank you for your help." Shakes all our hands, and when he gets to me, he was like, "That was amazing." And I say, "Thank you." I committed to the bit. I said yes, and I feel like I did reasonably well at it. So, sat down the rest of the show, and I had spent some time that night thinking about, was it okay? And like right now, I'm thinking about, was it okay that I just did Mr. I think I've come to peace with that moment of my life, that it was okay that I almost performed in blackface. And part of that is because the next morning, my wife and I, we go out to a fancy Sunday brunch at some fancy Chicago brunch place. I don't remember the name, probably a pun on the word egg. But we're sitting there, we're eating our breakfast. She's across from me in the booth, and these two very white college-age women come walking past. They're leaving the restaurant, but they stop at our table. And I look up like, what's it? And one of them says to me, "You're Mr. T." Thank you.